Hi, I'm Doris Epstein, and this is MENSCHlife TV. Purim is the only holiday where God is not mentioned, not even once. What is the significance of Purim? What does it have to tell us? What is its message? Rabbi Mendel Kaplan will be here to tell us about it and explain exactly what it's about. And Margie Arosh will be here to talk about the foods that the Persian Jews use and do a show and tell for us. And first, to make us laugh on Purim, welcome to Jim Brochu, the star of Zero Hour.
Thank you, Doris.
The story of Zero Mostel.
That's right.
Where there's plenty of laughter.
There was plenty of laughter, yes, plenty of, well, he was a very funny man. But he was also a very serious man, so there were very serious things in the play, but it's overwhelmingly funny, I think.
It's overwhelming, and you, from the beginning, you come on like a tornado.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's been a joy to be doing this show. I wrote it about 7 years ago now. And last night, you know, we're playing here in Toronto at the Bathurst Street Theatre, and last night was the 557th performance of the show.
How do you do it? How do you do it?
Well, every night is a new night, and the audience is a different audience. And so they're seeing it for the first time. So it's different for me every night.
Because it's live and because there's an audience?
Yeah, and it's because I enjoy doing the material. The material is very, very strong, you know, and it's not just my writing of it, it's what I based it on. Zero had a fascinating dramatic life. You know, as we were just chatting before, there were two zeros. There was the zero of the public, and as soon as there was one other person in the room, he was on. And then there was the zero who was a very private man, who was an artist. And that's why I set the play in his art studio on 28th Street.
That was a surprise.
Well, a lot of people didn't realize that he was a painter. Zero always said, I'm a painter who acts to buy money to get paint. So that painting was his passion from the time he was a child. And he was very conflicted about that because his father, being an Orthodox Jew, said, don't paint because you're creating a graven image. And that's against our religion. So Zero was very conflicted about the fact that his passion was for art, but yet his father was telling him his religion didn't support his passion. Very strange.
How did he live with that dual personality?
Well, I think after years and years of just, you know, being passionate about what he did, that he saw this was his life, and nothing was going to stop him from painting. And he left over 10,000 paintings. Yeah, and a lady, when I was doing the show in New York, she came backstage and she said my father was an artist. And he and Zero shared a studio together in the 40s and the early 50s. And back then, during the blacklist, when Zero was not working a whole lot, they would buy each other's paintings. You know, here's $40, I have to have that painting. So this lady told me she accumulated quite a few zeros, and she gave me one. So I have an original Zero Mostel in my living room.
Is it really good art?
Well, I mean, art is...
How would I know it's very individual.
Yeah, it is. It's, you know...
But how do people rate him as an artist?
Well, that's a very good question. I still, you know, as you said, I don't think a lot of people know he was an artist.
No.
You know, when I was here last year, they incorporated an exhibit of his paintings, and his son Josh came up. Josh Mostel, who's become a very good friend of mine now. I just had lunch with him before I came up here. And in fact, he gave me a present of a picture of Zero. Zero's favorite picture of himself from Fiddler on the Roof. So that's now in the house too. But I forgot what the question was. I'm just going on and on.
Well, I was going to ask you about what it's like to play so intensely and live inside the larger-than-life personality of Zero Mostel. You've done it so long. Is it affecting your persona? Are you changing into Zero Mostel?
No, quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. There was a film many years ago.
Are you similar in personality?
Well, I don't know. You know, I met Zero when I was 14 years old. He had a huge influence on me, so I was able to see the man up close and personal, and kind of extract a lot of his personality traits that I use in the show. But have I become Zero? No, far from it. Although I'm a painter, I love to paint.
You are a painter.
Well, and I actually paint a whole new picture every night during the show. I thought you were just fooling around, just doodling. No, I show the painting at the end. Did you miss that when I turned it around? Yes.
I didn't really.
And it's a portrait of this unseen man that I have been painting all through the evening.
And you're actually doing it.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. No, I paint a complete picture every night. Complete different one.
Is it as compulsive for you painting as it was for Mostel?
No. I'm more of a compulsive writer. I love to write, and I love to sketch.
And you wrote this play.
I did. Yeah. When I was about 23 years old, I had my first off-Broadway hit, and it was an Israeli review called Unfair to Goliath, written by a fellow named Ephraim Kishon. And do you know Kishon?
He's a famous name, yeah.
And Kishon wrote this part for me, and when I debuted it in New York, the critic of the New York Post said if they ever do the Zero Mostel story, Jim Brochu is my choice for the part.
Was that did that give you the idea?
It kind of put it in the back of my head back in 1970. And so as I got older, I thought, it was still in the back of my head. I was doing another show in New York, and I thought, what's next? And I was cleaning out my closet, and here is a theater arts magazine with Zero on the cover, pointing like that.
Okay, hold it. We'll be back in a minute. Hold that finger.
Hold the finger.
You're really holding that finger.
I'm holding the finger. You told me to hold the finger. I still got it. It's there.
So how did you write the play? What gave you the idea?
Zero was pointing, and I was approaching the age Zero was when he died.
Which is how old?
Well, I'm 65 now, and Zero was 62 when he died. He was doing a play in Philadelphia. He did one performance of it when he came down with flu, got sick, and then 8 days later he had an aneurysm. And he died in Sam Levine's arms, the great actor Sam Levine. So
on stage?
No.
Off stage?
No, he died in Jefferson Hospital. My mentor was an actor named David Burns, which is how I met Zero, because they were both in Forum together. And years later, Davy Burns died on stage during a tryout of a show called...
Death.
Well, you know,
for an actor.
I tell you, the last two sounds he ever heard were laughs and applause. And when he had this heart attack, and he died on the stage of the Forest Theater in Philadelphia.
But back to how you started this whole thing.
Yeah, and then I thought, okay, I'm approaching the age. I started to read everything, and I saw how dramatic his life was. The conflicts about both personally, religiously, politically. You know, he overcame an awful lot of obstacles. He was blacklisted, so he had 10 years of not working, and his wife, Kate, you know, took up the slack, and she supported the family. And then religiously, he married this Catholic girl, and so his parents cut him off. And personally, he had this terrible bus accident, you know, in 1960, that he was getting out of a car, and the crosstown bus almost took his left leg off. And through some new kind of neurosurgery, they were able to save the leg, which I actually saw one night after Fiddler. He came out in his bathrobe into the other part of the dressing room, and it was hideous. It was purple and disfigured. And Howard, I forget Howard Rodney, who was his dresser, you know, said to me that Zero is in pain all the time. And the fact that he would do 2 shows of Fiddler in a day, you know, being on stage 3 hours, 6 hours at a time.
And standing a lot.
And standing and dancing.
And dancing.
You know, it was, but he was in pain the whole time. So, but he overcame it with humor and craziness. My director is a wonderful lady named Piper Laurie. Remember,
the famous actress.
The very famous actress. And she's a very dear friend. And so she knew Zero. So I asked her to direct the play. And she said she remembers she would have breakfast with Zero at a place called the Tiptoe Inn at 86th and Broadway, and it would be summer, and he'd be there in a short-sleeved shirt and just take butter and start buttering his arm. You know, and then when that was gone, he'd say, "Waiter, we need more butter." So he was crazy, you know, he loved the attention.
And the dichotomy, the opposite, he loved to be alone.
Yeah, yeah. Josh told me something very interesting one night, because Zero always said, "I'm not a religious Jew." And it didn't mean a lot to him. That's what he said in public. Josh told me that one night he was coming home and Zero's bedroom door was just open a little crack. And it was like 2 o'clock in the morning. And there was Zero with a prayer shawl, and he was praying.
A talit. He was praying with a talit.
Mm-hmm.
That is really a contradiction.
It is.
He marries a Gentile girl.
Right.
His parents disown him, that he's very attached to. It's a lifelong pain. To your knowledge, did he do anything about it? Did he give anything to Josh? Did he educate him in any way? Did he affiliate in terms of his son? Did he have a bar mitzvah?
Oh yeah, I think they did all the rituals. And
was he circumcised? Do you know?
Could we make a call?
Anyway.
This information I do not have.
But he had a bar mitzvah?
Yeah, Josh did. Yeah, I'm sure. And I'm sure Zero did too, because his parents were terribly.
Zero was still in,
you know,
in the
was
family.
terribly Orthodox, and Zero tried to go to his father's when they said Shiva, and his brothers wouldn't let him in. And then Zero became very famous, and all of a sudden the brothers loved him again.
But not his parents.
Well,
didn't seem to.
His father died.
Terrible scene in the play.
Yeah.
Where his mother is on her deathbed.
That's right, and she refuses to accept what has happened.
On her deathbed.
Even there.
To your knowledge, did he try to ask his wife to convert, or?
I don't think he did. He
said it didn't matter.
Yeah, as he wrote very clearly, he said, "I'm not a religious Jew." And I think he was mad about Kate. And they were really a perfect couple together. They really were. They fed off each other. They were devoted to each other. She was the perfect mate for Zero.
But he was such a difficult man, such a complicated man.
Yeah, he could be. He could be very complicated. I remember going to see him in Forum one night, which I saw many, many times. And I would always go backstage and hang out with Zero afterwards. And this one night, he was just reading the riot act to one of the actors who had upstaged him or done something to him. And he was just this tornado, this hurricane of abuse heaped upon this poor actor. And then he finished that, and he looked at me and he said, "Oh, come on in." I mean, he changed on
like
a dime.
Child.
Yeah,
that's
a very good
One
analogy.
To another.
That's right.
A mood change.
Yeah, that's a very good analogy. But he was a vastly entertaining man. He was, a great actor, really a tremendous actor.
Tremendous actor.
Yeah, yeah. And what was nice is so many of Zero's friends have come to see the show. People who worked with him.
And do they approve of your...
Oh, very much so.
Okay, more about Zero Mostel and more about you. Stay with us. Jim Brochu, the star and writer of the show about Zero Mostel.
That's right.
0 Hour.
0 Hour.
You, like Zero, have been an actor your entire life?
Well,
did you ever do anything else?
I tell you, growing up in Brooklyn, I was very, very lucky. But up until the time I was 13 years old, being an Irish Catholic, I decided, and I knew it was my destiny, to be the first Brooklyn-born pope. No, I knew that was my job.
Are you serious?
Oh, very serious. Other kids would be practicing baseball. I'd be practicing how I'd come out on the balcony of St. Peter's and bless the crowd. Then when I was 13 years old, my father introduced me to a friend of his named Ethel Merman. He worked with Ethel's dad, Ed Zimmerman, and got us tickets to see Gypsy, I was brought on the stage after the show. The curtain was down, and here was Miss Merman.
How old were you?
I was 13, and it was June 20th, 1959. I'll never forget the day. And she said to me, she knew who I was, she knew my dad, and she said, "What are you going to be when you grow up?" And at that minute, the curtain rose of the Broadway theater, and it was all dark and a couple of people cleaning here after the matinee, and I just said, this is what I'm going to do. So I got back to Bay Ridge, and I got all the kids in the neighborhood together, and we did a review for charity. We raised $300 for the Cancer Society, and that was the beginning of it. And then I made my off-Broadway debut in 1968 in a play called Endicott and the Red Cross at the theater at St. Clement's, where 40 years later, Zero Hour opened at that theater. So it's really like coming full circle. And I've been so blessed that, you know, the people that, who are my heroes and my idols, growing up, I've come to know and gotten to work with.
Such as who?
Well, Lucille Ball. Everything I ever knew about comedy, I learned from watching I Love Lucy. And then I wrote a play called The Lucky O'Learys. And it was about two sisters of a certain age who had sibling rivalry with each other. And I sent it to Lucy over the transom. She didn't really know who I was. But I had taken a comedy class with her in 1977. She gave a 6-week seminar, told her I was in that. And I said, I also play backgammon. So the very next day, I went over. She called. She said, I love your play. Come over and we'll talk about it, and we'll play backgammon. So I went over, and there she was, and I sat down to play and broke the chair. Crack. I mean, I just broke the chair. So I didn't, Miss Ball, oh, call me Lucy. I said, well, Lucy, I just broke your chair. And she said, well, take another one. Oh, okay. Sit in the second one. Crack. Now I've broken 2 chairs in 2 minutes. I said, why don't I take that one? That one looks sturdy. She said, the other 2 look sturdy too. So we never talked about the play that day. We just talked and we bonded and we became really close friends. And at the end of that day, about 5 hours later, she said, well, you have to come back tomorrow. So I said, well, tomorrow's my birthday, so if I come back, you have to give me a present. And she said, well, maybe I'll give you a chair. And instead, she gave me this watch, which has not left my wrist since that day in 1988.
But still, 40 years, Jim. 40 years of unpredictability.
Yeah.
And instability, and you didn't always have jobs, one after another.
Well, I'm kind of an idiot. You know, I believe in stepping into thin air, and hopefully something will come up to support it. And that's been my life, and it's really been wonderful going
Any
from...
regrets?
I don't think so. Because of my career, I've been all over the world. I've been to all 7 continents, including Antarctica, where I performed for some penguins who were very appreciative of Zero Hour. They were all big fans of Zero. So, no, I don't think I do have any regrets. No, and if I do, they're too few to mention. But now, no, never mind.
What's next?
What's next? Well, that's a good question. It looks like I may be doing Fiddler on the Roof this summer. So that's definitely next. And when we close here, I'm supposed to go to China the day after. And
To do?
To do 0 Hour on a cruise ship.
Oh.
Which that's what's gotten me all over the world, is taking the show and doing it on these ships and getting to see the world that way. So I can't say I have any regrets, except I can't find shoes that fit.
What do you mean?
No, I need better shoes. That's my only regret.
Well, to live to be 65?
Yes, I'll be
65.
66 in August.
And to have so few regrets is extraordinary.
Well, I mean, what's the point of regretting? You know, the wonderful poet Emily Dickinson, she said, I live in the state of Massachusetts, but my sister Lavinia lives in the state of regret. What's the point?
If you could do it again?
In a second. You know, they always say, what does Jimmy Lipton say on his show? When you get to the pearly gates, what would you say to God? I'd say, let's do it again. I want to go again. on this wonderful ride.
And yet, you don't, in a way, you know what's next, but there are gaps.
Yeah, well, you never really know what's next. I mean, you try to plan out the future, and then you hope people will call.
And you can live okay with that uncertainty.
Yeah, I guess so.
That's marvelous. I wish.
Now I'm worried.
Or I gave you
Will I be able to?
I take it back.
You gave me
Forget
a
I said
Kanahara, as we used to say in Dublin.
Jim, I thank you for coming.
My pleasure.
You make people happy.
Thank you.
You make people happy. And I walked out of that show. It was not just a silly kind of happiness. It was a profound laughter, the kind of laughter where you laugh when things are bad, too. You have to laugh.
Right. Oh, yes, you do.
It's so awful.
Yeah, like Shalom Aleichem, laughter through tears. Yeah.
Well, keep us laughing.
Thank you. I will try.
Thank you, and good luck.
Thank you, Doris.
We'll stay with us for Rabbi Kaplan and a show and tell from Chef Margie Arosh. Purim is kind of a strange holiday, the only holiday where God is not mentioned. Here to tell us what the message of Purim is, what it's all about, is Rabbi Mendel Kaplan, and later Margie Arosh, Chef Margie Arosh, to talk about how Persian Jews celebrated with food, and to show us what one of their desserts is. Rabbi Kaplan, how do you explain that God is not mentioned, and yet it's a major holiday for us, Purim?
Well, Doris, let's first start by qualifying that strange is an appropriate word if you mean unusual.
I do.
So Purim is certainly unusual because we have a Megillah, which is one of the books of the Scripture, and it is different from all other books of the Scripture in that God's name is not mentioned. God's name is certainly mentioned on Purim. We make a blessing before we read the Megillah. In fact, we make 3 blessings. We make a blessing afterwards. There are special prayers that are recited.
But in the
we
Megillah,
mention God's name, yes. But the Megillah, which is, by all accounts, the central fulcrum of this holiday, because the blessings of Purim are made over the Megillah. Even though the bracha of Sha'an Asan Nisim, God who has done miracles, is about Itzumo Shel Yom, the essence of the day. Shehechianu bespeaks not only the mitzvah of Megillah, but in fact our sages tell us that we should have in mind the mitzvot of gifts to the poor, Mishloach Manot, gifts of food to a friend, as well as the Seudah, the feast. Nonetheless, those blessings are recited over the Megillah. And you correctly highlight the fact that the Megillah is very unusual vis-a-vis the other books of the Scripture where God's name is not mentioned at all. So let's start from the top. The Ibn Ezra, in his commentary on the Megillah, says that the reason is a practical one. We knew that this story would be copied from its Hebraic or Jewish sources into the annals of the pagan idolaters who were the monarchy in ancient Persia. And it was self-understood that if we were to write the name of our deity, of God, they would replace that name with a foreign deity, with a pagan idol. So you would have a Megillah that brings glory and praise to pagan idols, something that the Jewish people are not supposed to be a part of.
So that was a deliberate omission.
It was a deliberate omission. As the Ibn Ezra says, the Rebbe points out that there's a clear scriptural instruction, Le Yishama al Picha, that the name of pagan idols should not be heard on the lips. And the sages, quoted by Rashi in the Chumash, tell us that this means that we should not cause the name of pagan idols to be mentioned. Rashi even goes so far as to say you shouldn't have a business dealing with somebody if it means that that will necessitate an oath by the name of a pagan idol. So this is the simple reason. However, we know in Judaism nothing's ever simple. And in addition to that simple reason, there's a much deeper reason. So Purim celebrates a miracle. No question about that. In fact, an incredible miracle. The kind of miracle that transformed the circumstances. We use the word in Hebrew, v'nahapochu, upside down. The Jewish people went from being slated for genocide to having circumstances that were quoted and described with sason, simcha, yakar, or gladness, joy, light, beauty. It was wonderful. It was like the most wonderful moment during that exilic period. It was the climax of a fantastic time. And from there we were able to go back into Eretz Yisrael and rebuild the second Beit HaMikdash. So we have, in the course of a year, which is a very short amount of time, in the course of less than a year, we went from literally having a target on our backs, from being slated, each and every one of us, for genocide, to being in a state where we had enormous esteem and respect from the people around us. So it's a great miracle.
It is.
But there isn't any moment that one could say is miraculous. You see, when our ancestors left Egypt, the sea split open. And that's enormous. It's just incredible. The sea splits open. There's movies made about it.
Yeah.
When we talk about miracles of Hanukkah even, a tiny band of soldiers who can defeat mighty armies is inexplicable. And you can't even talk about a home advantage because the Assyrians, the Greeks who fought against the Maccabees, were aided and abetted by many of the local Jews. So they had a home advantage, they had a military advantage, they had, from a position of munitions, they had everything for victory. It made no sense. In fact, it still cannot be explained. So this is the kind of miracle that, even though it's not the splitting open of the sea, yet it can be couched in terms of astounding. The story of Purim has nothing astounding about it. There is no astounding or remarkable detail. What is remarkable is when you connect the dots.
Yes.
So really the hand of God is always there, but the hand of God can only be seen when you lay out the whole panorama and you look at detail after detail after detail. Everything just so happens to take place at the right moment, at the right time, to the right person. The sum total is a wonderful miracle, the miracle that we celebrate on Purim, but that's why God's name is not mentioned. And I'll tell you something, Doris. The Hasidic masters suggested that not only is this not less of a holiday or less of a miracle, but quite to the contrary. I have a name. You have a name. We have names. You're Chef Margie Arosh. You even have a title. But the truth is that when you strip away your title or even your name, you still exist. Yes. Doris has many titles, but you still exist. Even when you're not on MENSCHlife television, you still exist. There's a part of us that's deeper, more powerful, more intrinsic than our name. Our names are somewhat superficial. The name of God is also somewhat superficial. It's a way we relate to God. It's a way we call to God. Purim is the essence of divinity laid bare. And the essence of divinity laid bare is something that is, as you said, unusual. Totally different.
So there's a cover, and then God is revealed.
So it's all concealed, but yet, if one is wise, one can see past the veil, or can pierce the veil to see the truth.
Okay, let's in our next segment, let's go to how that veil is obscuring us from God and how to get there.
Sounds like a plan.
We'll be back in a minute. Rabbi Kaplan, you say although God is not mentioned, and he's actually concealed from us, there's a cover-up in the holiday of Purim, and yet he's there. Can you comment on that?
See, Doris,
how to find him?
Therein really lies the message of Purim. And perhaps this is why it's such an important holiday. And perhaps it's why our sages tell us that when Mashiach will come, all of the books of the scripture will be rendered useless, for the 5 books of Moses will be open and clear. We won't need the further commentary of the prophets to clarify the 613 mitzvot, but the book of Esther, it says, will always be there. Because the real essence of life and the essence of Yiddishkeit is to be able to pull the veil down, to be able to see past the camouflage. God creates a world. The world in Hebrew, olam, is a permutation of the Hebrew word helam, which means a concealment. Our job is to see past the concealment. That's the message of Purim. And that's why many of the customs that are associated with Purim have a similar motif.
Such as what?
People get dressed up.
Oh,
People say,
covering up.
yes,
they
it's
say,
hidden,
is it the
yeah.
Jewish Halloween? I don't know if I should laugh or cry. I said, we've been doing this for centuries before you even dreamed about Halloween. The point is, we get dressed up, and on Purim, when you come to shul, and you went to speak to the rabbi, he might actually be the baker. He's just dressed as a rabbi. And when you went to speak to the police officer, no, actually, he's the rabbi. And then you went to speak to the fellow who looks like a clown, but actually he's a surgeon. And the point, nothing is as it seems. Nothing is as it seems. And that's the message for us, that God's hand is ever present. And we ask, where is God?
Yeah, we have to make an effort.
How could this be this way?
That's
And
right.
we're reminded to bolster ourselves with faith and to know that God is always there.
That's right.
And that coincidence is simply an 11-letter name for God. And there are no coincidences. And everything, as the Baal Shem Tov would say, is by divine design. Every detail is by providence.
What about getting drunk? What about the idea of getting drunk so that you don't know Haman from Mordecai?
So the idea of getting drunk, as you put it, which
To that point,
really requires a full segment in and of itself. But let me just say that for somebody who is capable of elevating themselves to a heightened state of spiritual consciousness, where they're not in touch with God because of what they're actually thinking or studying or doing, but because that connection, that bond is intrinsic, this is the notion of Adala Yoda of Purim. Purim is to be able to transcend all and any norms, and to be able to lay bare the essence of our bond and our connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, with Almighty God. And by the way, we see this in the food also. The Hamantashen, which is perhaps the most famous example of Purim food, is essentially something that's dough covered. There's something inside. It may be cherries, it may be prune, it may be mun, it may be chocolate. You never know what's in your Hamantash. You have to bite into it. You have to find out. That's the message. People have kreplach in the soup, which is like a phyllo dough. Chef Margie will talk all about that. I'm not sure if they do that in Persia, but it's a custom. And the origin of the custom is you don't know what's in the krepel, as it's called. Is it meat? Is
like
it
little
chicken?
ravioli, yeah.
Little ravioli like.
Meat ravioli.
So am I getting it? This is the message that God is only revealed when we make an effort to look for Him, to do something?
One of the messages, it is a message of Purim, that God is ever present. And that our mission in life is to find the hand of God. And by living in accordance with Hashem's will, with the Torah, not by doing mitzvahs that make us feel good, or we can find a comfort zone within. That's not serving Hashem, that's serving oneself. Serving God means to bow one's head in submission and to say, Naasa, we will do, as we did when we received the Torah the first time. And after we say Nishma, let us begin to study and develop an appreciation for. But it's predicated on a sense of devotion, diligence, and dedication that is super rational. And that's the essence of Purim. And that's why one of the things that happened on Purim is, when we got to Torah the first time, it says we were swept off our feet. God metaphorically placed a mountain over our heads. As the Alter Rebbe explains in Likutei Torah, the founder of the Chabad movement, says that there was this divine revelation that was intoxicating. So the people said yes, but they weren't really doing so with the full freedom of choice. In the time of Purim, everybody had a choice to make. They could have said, we're going to leave this Judaism behind. And had they done that, they wouldn't have been prosecuted. But they said, we will remain
And
Jews.
they could have assimilated.
They could
this
have
was
assimilated.
The first diaspora.
They could have assimilated. But they chose not to. And that's why it says, Kimu v'kiblu ha-Yehudim. That the Jewish people accepted upon themselves. That's what they had accepted so many centuries earlier when they stood at the foot of Mount Sinai. But were swept off their feet. Now, at Purim, we accepted this under no duress. And we had every good reason to reject it. Yet we didn't. And so this is something we celebrate. We celebrated it then, by Yamim Haim, and we celebrate it today, Bizman Hazeh. And it's this message of total commitment, of total a sense of devotion to God, one that transcends the limits of our heart, our mind, and even our imagination. That's what Purim's all about.
What about Esther? We see her as a heroine. She sacrifices herself, actually, to this idiot, drunk king, and yet we never hear from her.
Well, we always hear about her. In fact, she's more alive today than many people who are walking in the street.
How do you explain that?
How many people that lived 25 centuries ago have little girls dressing up like them, have a book that's named after them, and are still being talked about on MENSCHlife television? I don't know of any woman of her time, but we talk about her. You know, it's interesting. The book is called the Book of Esther, but it's written by Mordechai and Esther.
Yeah.
They wrote it? What happened to Mordechai?
And what happened to
answer-
Mordechai? He became a courtier of the
He became
king,
a very
right?
important person, but the real essence, it's really all about Esther. Even though she just does what Mordechai says, the Lubavitcher Rebbe explains, Mordechai enabled Esther to do what Esther had to do to be who Esther had to be. So really, it's all about Esther. And she lives on eternally.
Thank you. We could go on and on. There's so much more to it than I thought, than on the surface.
Indeed there is.
And we have to dig under the surface to really understand the holiday. Thank you, Rabbi Kaplan.
My pleasure. Happy Purim.
Thank you. Chag Sameach.
Sameach.
Chag Sameach.
Purim, the food, the customs. What do the Persian Jews eat for Purim? How do they celebrate? With us is Chef Margie Arosh.
Thank you.
Margie, you've got, you're going to show and tell, actually. What is this?
Well, what I brought here today, this is a Persian roulade. And it's basically a jelly roll cake, and they make this cake a lot to celebrate or to eat on Shabbat. And what's special about this jelly roll, it's a basic, very simple mix, which is just 4 eggs, a cup of flour, and a cup of sugar, a little vanilla. That's all it is. You mix it up, pour it on a sheet pan, bake it onto a sheet of parchment paper, just like this.
What's the
sheet.
oven number?
At 350, and it should take about 20 minutes. That's it.
So we
take
have a
it
flat
out. Yeah, and it'll be just on a sheet of parchment paper, just like this. And when it comes out of the oven, as soon as you're able to touch it, just roll it up, so you'll already get this shape. When it's cool enough, you'll make some whipped cream. Or you can do different kinds of fillings. Actually, a nice idea to replace the whipped cream is to do a pudding. You can do a pudding and then mix in a little bit of egg whites if you want to cut down the fat, or you can mix in a little bit, just 1/4 of the amount of whipped cream that you were originally going to use.
Put it on the dough.
Yes, but the twist, the Iranian twist to this cake is, before you fill it, they use rose water or orange blossom water, which is a flavoring. It's very, very fragrant, and it's known to Middle Eastern cultures. And basically, they just drizzle a little bit or brush it on, a little bit of this flavoring onto the dough, onto the pastry first. And then they will fill the inside with the cream.
Like that.
That's it. Just fill it up. Don't go too close to the edges, because, you know, if you go too close to the edges, like a sandwich, it'll just squeeze out the sides. And after you have it all ready, just like this, you can take a piping bag if you want. But the first thing you would do is cover, you know, this is really good to cover any imperfections. So you'll just take some of the cream, and we're going to go right across the top.
With a spatula.
With a spatula first. I've brought some different tools. This is just a regular rubber spatula, which is very good because it scrapes, it goes right into the corners. That's why we use a rubber spatula when mixing and baking. So we're going to take this and slather it all on. So, oops, not without making a mess. This is real cooking. And once we get the whole top covered with the cream, I'm going to put a little extra on. And you can be generous and allow it to go down the sides any way you want. Free form it. And once I have it all covered, just about there, and you'll go down afterwards and cover all the sides. There we go. We can put some garnish on it. Now, we all know we eat with our eyes first. So everybody just sees little mounds of whipped cream on top, and it's already appetizing. Then we have I brought some strawberries and whipped cream, just some very pretty strawberries. And I can show you, we can either put them on just half a strawberry if you want. You just cut it in half and lay it flat.
With the green?
Sometimes with the green. With the green, it just gives a little bit of color. You can just lay them on, a couple of them on the end. And let's say I want to make a different kind of garnish. I want to fan it out. So you can take a strawberry like this. The green here is very fresh. and very nice. If it's wilted or it's not as pretty, you would pull it off.
That's a good idea already. I never thought to include greens.
Oh yeah, well it gives a little bit
decoratively.
of color. You know,
It does.
we
I
with
like
our
it.
eyes, and then you can just by making little slices just like that down the side all the way to the end. You create a kind of fan and just push it out. Look how pretty.
Wow.
So we have
That's
a
a
little
great
fan.
tip.
Look at that. And the whole thing from edge to edge, you see? If you want, you can pull this off, but I like to leave it on here. We're going to use this one for the middle. And look how pretty that
Beautiful.
came out.
Beautiful.
And these are just little pieces of chocolate. You can melt some chocolate.
Did you buy that? Did
No,
you
no,
make
no.
that?
This was made. This was made, actually. This was made, and it's just drizzled chocolate. You can melt some chocolate in the microwave if you want, or on a double boiler. Put it into a little baggie. Oh, the reason I brought this is actually a disposable piping bag. You can buy them. I put a little tip in it.
To make a rosette.
That's right. So if you wanted also, you could just take a little plastic bag and put some chocolate in it, cut off the little tip, and drizzle it all around. Would look nice. Or drizzle it right on the parchment paper, let it set, and you can get things that look like this. Any kind of garnish. And then you set them into your cake, you know, standing up any way you want.
So drizzle it on
on
the
a
paper,
parchment
on the
paper.
parchment paper, and just
let it set, let it get cold. And if and you should be able to pull it off, and you can stick them in. Look, you're going to give it a little bit of height. Anytime you decorate with a little height, and I know we didn't do the front of it, so we'll just take a little bit here, cover the front of it, and then you'll go on and garnish it as you like. Now, the reason I wanted to talk a little bit about this is that these piping pegs are such a great tool. Wonderful tool. And the great thing about them is that you throw them away now.
Where do you buy that?
You can buy them in any kitchen store, and I've seen them like any kitchen store supplies or Canadian Tire, even stores like that. And you take some of the cream, you put it inside the bag.
Can you do it in about 1 minute?
In 1 minute. Yep. And you push it down, squeeze, and then you can, let's say,
wow.
You see little rosettes. There's a little rosette coming out.
And a bit of icing.
That's right.
Coloring, if it's icing.
That's right. That's for decoration. So to just show you how to little pipe a little rosette out of it, and you garnish it, you eat it, and it's a delicious cake. It's impressive for guests, and it's a nice thing to make for the Suda for Purim. So if you're going to sit down, you have your family coming over, what a better way to end a meal.
Quick, what other suggestions for Suda?
We made a beautiful rice dish. If we're going to do Persian, basmati rice.
Does it have to be basmati?
It does not have to be basmati. You can use a converted rice also, which is very easy to cook with. 2 to 1, 1 part rice, 2 parts water, and a little bit of oil, a little bit of salt. Make some rice, and then add in whatever you want to it.
We've got the roulade for the dessert.
That's right, rice. And you can add some fruit.
A main dish.
In a main dish, I would do a fish or a chicken. They actually, in Iran, cook with a lot of fruit added to their food, like apricots, prunes.
With chicken?
That's right.
Prunes with chicken?
They do like a sweet and savory type of thing. And it's very similar. It's influenced by Middle Eastern cooking, that they do that a lot in.
Okay, you're just, this is just a tease.
This is just a tease, yes.
So will you come back?
Whenever you invite me. My pleasure. Thank you.
Chag Sameach.
Thank you so much, Doris.
And that's it for today. Be a mensch, and I'll see you next time.